Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Orioles down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll to the front. Oh, now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Paytor in the end zone for the touchdown. May has thrown this one. He threw it left-handed. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Theo at the 35. Theo, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Theo, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Vlog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. And for the first time in a long time, not here alone on this edition of the podcast, as that means we are turning our attention to the 2026 team, to the team that is going to be on the field when the Tar Heels officially take to the field for the 2026 season on August 29th. That is going to be the date. And so with that, we are less than 2 months from the start of the season for Carolina. And so what does that mean? It's time to get into our position previews for this year. We do them every single year. On the blog side of things, I think if I have this correctly, I'd have to go back and look at when the first article was posted. I know I did it the first year that I had the blog on Medium, which was a blog site at the time. I think it still exists to this day. But that was almost 10 years ago. And so we have been doing position previews ever since then. On the podcast side of things, we've been doing them for quite a while as well. And so we are officially here to bring you those tonight. And it starts with the quarterbacks. That is the group that we're going to go through this evening. And we're going to dive into every element of this quarterback room for you here tonight. We want to hear your comments as well. What do you think about the quarterback room? Answer some of the questions as to that we have as to whether or not this room is going to be better this upcoming season. Who do you want to see start when we get to Dublin? All of those questions we will be answering here on tonight's edition of the podcast. But first of all, buddy, it's been a while since you were on here. We've been doing a ton of editions of the recruiting stuff. And you know, it's been a lot of fun, but glad to have you back and interested to know where your excitement level is for the season as we get ready to start our position previews for this year.
Yeah, no, it feels good to be back. And the fact that we're inside 2 months away is kind of crazy. It tells you how quickly the off season has gone, whether it's been a fun off season is a different topic for a different day, but you know, the college football itch is starting to scratch. You know, I've gotten big into the World Cup, but outside of the World Cup and NASCAR, man, I'm ready for football season to get here, man. Kind of like I have done some years when I don't know how ultimately good we are going to be or how ultimately good we can be. I do find myself talking myself into, oh no, we can get to a bowl game. We can finally beat state. We can finally do these types of things that we talk so much about and want to achieve. And a big reason why is this quarterback room is night and day better than it was a year ago. Top to bottom, there's more high-end talent here. There's more depth here. You've got a better offensive coordinator here. And all that stuff matters. And I do think that if this season is going to be deemed a success, if we look back at 2026 North Carolina football and we say that was a successful season for Bill Belichick, it'll be a big reason why, because of this quarterback position being significantly improved over last year with Gio Lopez, the guy that guided the ship for the majority of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it can really only go up if we're being honest. I mean, it was a pretty bad overall year for the quarterbacks. But look, we talked about it a lot during last season, and then we've talked about it a little bit here during this offseason. I don't think all of that is on the quarterbacks. I want to make that very clear. I think a lot of that was on Freddie Kitchens and what was just a completely uninventive offense. And we've learned that as we've gone throughout this offseason, I mean, there were a lot of people that took issue with the offense that he ended up running last season. They knew that it was going to struggle when they saw it back in the spring. They knew it was going to struggle when they saw what it looked like in the fall when they got Gio Lopez in there and they weren't utilizing his talents. And so now you're hoping that by moving to Bobby Petrino as your offensive coordinator, things are going to change. Things are going to be a little bit different, and they're going to play to their strengths this season and hopefully to the strengths of your quarterback. Now, there are, a few different guys in this room, guys that have different skill sets, I think, and we'll talk about those here tonight. But I do think that one of the big storylines coming into the season, coming into these position previews, really is, as you mentioned, the position being significantly better than it was a year ago. But, this was a room that we were hoping was going to be maybe even a little bit better than that, because you were hoping that there was going to be a little more competition coming in here in the fall. And that you were going to get a look at Taron Dickens, the transfer quarterback from Western Carolina. Look, one of the last edition of the podcast that you were on, we talked about Taron Dickens no longer coming to Carolina. We sort of dove into that. But for people that didn't listen to that podcast, how important is that loss for Carolina? And do you think that he was a guy that was really slated to be the starting quarterback for the Tar Heels, as some people have said they thought he was ultimately going to be?
I don't know if he was going to start. I do think that he was going to be a wild card. I think that they could have gone into the season prepared for Billy Edwards to be the quarterback, Miles O'Neill to be the quarterback. But when they got into fall camp, when Dickens would have arrived on campus, he could have thrown a wrench into all their plans. There was going to be concern about how would the body hold up making the transition from Western Carolina to a school like North Carolina, where you're playing power conference competition virtually every single week of the regular season. If the body was going to hold up, the production was going to be there, because that's what he's done at Western Carolina. And I thought he could have been a real weapon in Bobby Petrino's offense that has evolved to whatever suits his quarterback. And that's what was really going to be interesting with him, was that if he hit, you really wouldn't know just how explosive Carolina's offense could ultimately be. So I think that's the thing, is that right now I guess there's not the unknown anymore. We kind of know what Billy Edwards is as a quarterback. We have a kind of a feel of what Miles O'Neill is as a quarterback, just going back his time when Petrino recruited him to A&M. We weren't going to be really known what Taron Dickens, what it would look like at the FBS level, and so I think that's kind of what stinks, is we won't get to figure that out. Although would we have found that out with the way that Belichick runs the program? Probably not anyway, until he would have stepped on the field and either lit it up or fell flat on its face. But even without him, I still have a confidence in this position to give Carolina a competitive chance every single week. And that wasn't necessarily the feeling we had last year with Gio. And I'll agree with you where it wasn't all on Gio Lopez. If you go back to when Petrino got hired, and I think he got hired the same day Gio Lopez entered the portal, if not, it was a day before. But when we talked about Petrino, I was open to Gio Lopez being our quarterback. Mm-hmm. Like if that would have been the route Carolina would have went, you could have sold me on that vision, because I think Petrino could have catered the offense to maximize the skill set. That's not what happened last year with Freddie Kitchens. He never once put him in a position to succeed. I feel like no matter who emerges as Carolina's signal caller, every week Bobby Petrino will try to do the best that he can to put that guy in a position to put up the types of numbers he's going to have to put up to give this team a chance to win the requisite number of games we expect with the amount of financial investment that has been committed to Bill Belichick and this entire football operation.
Yeah, I want to make it very clear that I think that Taron Dickens was a guy that could have came in here and did some special things. I think judging off of his time at Western Carolina, he was certainly a guy that I think really could have fit what this offense was ultimately trying to be. And I think they would have molded around him. I think you don't put up those types of numbers that you put up at Western Carolina and just come here and completely fizzle out. I would have been shocked because, yes, Gio Lopez put up good numbers at South Alabama. The numbers that Taron Dickens put up were numbers that should have had him in the FCS Heisman race. But because he was a guy that didn't play the first few games of the season because of academics and because of Western Carolina wasn't great, he wasn't a guy that was in that conversation. That is the type of quarterback that Carolina could have brought in. But look, there's nothing you can do about it, guys. He wasn't going to qualify academically. And it's like I said, you would rather have that be known at this time of year than to go all through fall camp and say, this is our guy. We know this is going to be the guy that's going to come out here and light it up for Carolina. He's looking great. And then all of a sudden you get to Dublin and you hear, oh, he's academically ineligible. And now you have to pivot and get another quarterback prepared because you weren't doing that ultimately during the time that you had leading up to the game, the time that you were preparing because you thought that it was going to be Taron Dickens. So it's not the worst timing. It's just, it sucks because it really would have been nice to see what he ultimately could have been. But I am with you. I think this quarterback room is still in really good shape. I think it's really good shape as opposed to where it was last year. Ultimately, where do I think it ranks in the ACC? Probably bottom half. And that's something that you just have to deal with. You're just hoping that other areas of this team really step up. There's areas that in years past, especially on the defensive side of the ball, didn't really carry their weight. You're hoping that now those areas end up carrying their weight this year, especially early on in the season as you navigate trying to find out who your starting quarterback is going to be, especially if you don't figure that out in fall camp. But I think, whether it's Billy Edwards Jr. who you roll with, or if it's Miles O'Neill, even if you somehow, get to Travis Burgess because Travis Burgess is really just that good, or, if you get to him later in the season, I think Carolina is far better than they were a year ago. They have a competent offensive coordinator, not a boob who shouldn't have been coaching at this level. Should not be an offensive coordinator at any level anymore. I mean, after what I saw from him this past year, I can't believe that he's still a coach in football. It's just mind-blowing to me. So I think that this is a group that's going to be set up for much more success this year. And let's take a look at some of the guys that are in the room. As you mentioned, it really is a two-quarterback battle at this point, it feels like. It's Billy Edwards Jr., the transfer from Wisconsin, or Miles O'Neill, the transfer from Texas A&M. And, Billy Edwards Jr., when you look at him, he transfers in from Wisconsin after playing in just 2 games a year ago because of a grade 3 PCL strain in his left knee. The year prior, he did start at Maryland, where he completed 65% of his passes for 2,881 yards and posted a 15-9 touchdown to interception ratio. Also, had some decent numbers running the football. Shows up a little more on his film, especially him in the red zone, than it shows up in terms of the pure statistics. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to wow anybody, but he's a solid veteran who's been there and done it before at the Power 5 level. I think that's something that, attracted Carolina to him, because I'll admit, when they brought him in, I was a little disappointed. I thought, man, can Carolina go big game hunting at some point at this quarterback position? Maybe they go out and get a guy like Sam Levitt. Maybe they get in the running for him. Maybe they do go out and get in the running for a guy. Now, circling back around to it, maybe it was the best thing that they didn't get in the Brendan Sorsby conversation with everything that ultimately happened with him. But I was looking for one of those big names. And so at the time, it was pretty disappointing. But the more that you look at it, I think it's a solid addition to the room. And if this is the guy that they end up rolling with, I think he gives you a much higher floor than Gio Lopez gave you last year when he came in and took over the starting job to begin the season.
That's the best way to put it. I thought with the Belichick hire, Carolina was going to be able to attract big names at the quarterback spot out of the transfer portal. And that's how I thought they were going to operate. And maybe after this year, Carolina can build towards that, because we know that the 2027 is their North Star. That's what they're building towards. That's when they really think they're going to be ready to compete. But you go back to when Belichick got hired, we thought maybe Quinn Ewers, had he went to the portal, could have been an option. Like, those were the types of names that we were kind of tossing around out there. So when you see Billy Edwards Jr., you probably don't think that's the type of guy that would come to play for Bill Belichick. But you look at the production that you had a year ago, the offense as anemic as it's been really since Nathan Elliott, Chaz Surratt were trying to play quarterback at the back end of the Larry Fedora era. Gio Lopez's ceiling never could get to where Billy Edwards' floor was at Maryland, where he had this year where he threw for nearly 3,000 yards and 15-9 touchdowns interception ratio. Those numbers aren't mind-blowing. Those numbers aren't going to pop off and impress your mother, but it's still better quarterback play than what Carolina had last year. And if Carolina had that type of quarterback play last year, how different do those games that Carolina lost in the middle of the season, those games maybe go the other way. Like, they probably get Virginia at home, and if they get that win, then maybe Carolina goes to the bowl game. And so that's how I look at it, is even if Billy Edwards is Carolina's starter, and that's the production that Carolina gets, it's still an upgrade from a year ago, man. Yep. And it's still, I think, if the defense is going to be what the defense was the back half of the year, and there's reason to believe that Carolina's defense is going to be closer to that than what we saw the first part of the year, then Carolina will have a chance to win more games and also be more competitive in some of these games. Because if the quarterback play is going to be closer to what it was last year, then when Carolina plays Clemson, when Carolina plays Notre Dame, when Carolina plays Miami, they're going to get their ass kicked. And it's not going to be very competitive. It's not going to be very fun to watch. If they get closer to what Billy Edwards provides, they have a chance to be competitive in those games and show the type of growth and progress Bill Belichick internally is selling his team on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have to say it at this point, judging off of what we have heard coming out of spring practice, and maybe you want to say that these guys are selling a bill of goods and they're close to the program, so that's why they're saying this. Some of the super negative, and we're looked at as pretty negative. I mean, people in our space look at us as one of the more negative podcasts out there, but I don't see any way possible that this team is worse at the quarterback position than they were last year. I just can't see it, man. And, we'll talk about Miles O'Neill here. We'll talk about Travis Burgess. Those guys are more purely talented than the group that they had last year. Like, say what you want. It still blows my mind to this day. I don't understand why Bryce Baker was not better. I don't know, because I am still as stunned today as I was then. And this is no slight to Arturi Newkirk, but I'm still shocked that Arturi Newkirk beat him out last year. That was a 4-star prospect. I watched this dude in high school. I thought he was the next guy for Carolina at the quarterback position. And I was wrong. Now we'll see what he ultimately ends up becoming. But, I think a lot of people thought that he was going to be a lot better. Max Johnson, I think some people thought that with his experience, when he was out there on the field, he would be able to bring an element that just wasn't there for him. That was me included. I thought there was something there because he had success in the SEC that maybe it would extend over to Carolina. The guy was basically, he was so based in the short passing game that there really wasn't anything else that he could do when he was out there. He didn't have a strong arm. He couldn't win downfield, couldn't even really win in the intermediate portions of the game either. And that was the same thing with your starting quarterback. This year, you've got much more arm strength in the room. You got much more athleticism. You've got, as I mentioned, an offensive coordinator that's going to take advantage of that. And I think you've got a guy that's your senior man in this room, the guy that hey, we can turn to if we have to in Billy Edwards Jr., if that's ultimately the way that you choose to go, that's going to be solid. Is he going to be great? No. Is he going to be a guy that's even top 10 in the ACC in terms of quarterback play this year? I have no idea. He could be 10. But is he going to be a guy that's just absolutely horrible? That's maybe the worst quarterback in the ACC, if not worst, then second to last. I don't think you're going to have to worry about that this year. Then you get to Miles O'Neill. This is the other guy that's challenging him right now. And Miles O'Neill is a fascinating case. He comes over from Texas A&M where he played in 8 games in his 2 seasons. He completed 60% of his passes for 171 yards and posted a 2-to-2 touchdown to interception ratio in those limited snaps that he ended up playing. The reason that he is fascinating is because he was a 4-star prospect, and guess who recruited him to Texas A&M? That would be Bobby Petrino, your current offensive coordinator. So that means that there is a connection to him. That's someone that Bobby Petrino looked at and said, we feel like ultimately is going to be able to do the things that we need to do in this offense to be successful. And when I watched him back at the high school level, I watched him a little bit in the Texas A&M spring game that they played last year. I liked some of what I saw there. You could tell definitely a little hesitant at certain points, but I think with more comfortability, more playing time, which he'll get more reps here this offseason now that he is in line to potentially be the starting quarterback for Carolina, or is at least challenging to be the starting quarterback for Carolina, should help in those areas. You go back to his high school film, the arm talent is there, and everything that we've been told, any of the reports that have come out from inside Carolina, from Tar Heel 24/7 say this kid has got an arm. That's the one thing that we know. Whether or not he's going to be able to reel in the accuracy, I think is going to be something that we have to ultimately figure out. But in terms of the arm strength, it's there. And last year, that was something that couldn't necessarily be said. I think that's something that's really different about this year's room, is that you do have a couple of guys that have pretty big arms. I feel pretty confident in what I saw from Miles O'Neill to say that he's at least competing for this and is going to give Billy Edwards a run for his money. What do you think about him being the second guy in this quarterback race as of right now? The guy that's keeping it close with Billy Edwards as we head into fall.
I think this is the guy that I want to emerge as Carolina's starting quarterback for 2026. And I haven't watched nearly as much film as you have, but did go back and just tried to watch a little bit to get a feel, reading the stuff coming out from whether inside Carolina, Tar Heel 24/7. The ability to push the football down the field is, to me, what's very intriguing about him. Because I think there's a desire to get more explosive. There's a need to get more explosive. It's really hard to grind out, 70, 80-yard drives at this level. It's a whole lot easier to put points on the board when you can do so in 3 or 4 plays. And it's why I also think that maybe this quarterback battle might lend itself into the actual season. I think it'll carry over into the season opener, just because for him, like, practice is obviously valuable, but we just got to see this guy in live reps, like against another team with stuff on the line. How does he respond? But the arm talent is there. Like the ability to get the ball down the field is there. It's can it be accurate, and can he protect it? Is this a guy that if we put him out there, is he going to run around and throw 3 or 4 interceptions? I don't know. Is he, or can he be a guy that has the arm talent but can protect the football? So this is why I wish we had a spring game that we would have had access to. This is why I wish that we didn't have a program that was going to be so secretive. I do feel like because there's a quarterback battle going into this thing, we're going to get a little bit more. It's just natural, right? Like there's going to be leaks that come out about what's going on. But I can tell you that this is the guy that I would be more willing to hitch my wagon to 2026 and see, let's see where it goes, as opposed to Billy Edwards Jr., just because I do think between those two guys, his floor may not be as high, but I think his ceiling may be high. And being coached by Bobby Petrino, when you have a quarterback that's got a high ceiling, usually that kind of blossoms into something fun and dynamic. And I think Miles O'Neill could be a guy that could really come out of nowhere to be one of the more talked about quarterbacks, at least in the ACC this year.
Yeah, I think you at the end put it perfectly. This is a guy that has a much higher ceiling, I think, than Billy Edwards Jr. does. Billy Edwards Jr. is a guy that might be able to get you to a bowl game. That might be the peak of what he's able to do. Maybe 7 wins if it just everything broke right. Miles O'Neill is a guy that could get you 8 wins this year because he fits the offense probably a little bit better that Bobby Petrino is wanting to run. He's got the ability to create more explosive plays. Look, it's not Billy Edwards Jr. It's not that he can't throw downfield. He just doesn't. If you look at the average yards per completion, I mean, they're very similar to what we saw from Gio Lopez last year, which means that it's a guy that's going to throw the ball close to the line of scrimmage and really rely on his receivers to be able to make plays after the catch. Now, I think that Carolina's got more guys that are able to do that this year, but you also want to be able to utilize a guy like Mason Humphrey. You went out and got him in the portal. You're paying him money. There's a reason why you're wanting to bring him in. There's some other guys on this roster that you're hoping are going to be able to fill that role as well, like Cornell Warren, who you got out of the high school ranks and is coming off of a really strong spring practice. Hopefully your quarterbacks are able to take advantage of that. And so, yeah, I think it's perfectly fine to sit here and say to yourself, look, the guy that I hope emerges is Miles O'Neill. Is that the guarantee that that's going to happen? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. As I said, I heard a lot about the fact that he does have a strong arm, but I want to know more about the accuracy. Was he accurate downfield? Go back to the high school ranks. That was one of the things that really shined about him when I watched his high school film. I thought he was a guy that really succeeded in that area, throwing the ball down the field and completing it, because of how accurate he was, in the deep passing game. That's something that you're hoping is there and it's going to carry over, because when you go back to that spring game, you just didn't necessarily see that. There were some accuracy issues at times for him in that spring game. Now, again, with more reps, is he able to sort of iron that out? He's had another year to grow. Maybe that is something that he definitely has figured out at this point, and now he's ready to take over that starting job. Those are going to be the things that need to be answered, though, because I think we know there is the capability to be accurate for Billy Edwards Jr. Completing 65% of your passes, pretty solid. That'll play especially in the ACC. You've got to see similar type of numbers. Maybe not that if he's throwing downfield, but you've got to see that deep ball accuracy from Miles O'Neill in order to feel confident. I think these two are going to battle till the end. I think this is a legitimate quarterback competition. I think in their minds, the staff wouldn't admit it, but they probably are hoping the same thing, that Miles O'Neill is the guy that ultimately ends up emerging. But we'll just have to wait and see. Now you get to the guys that are behind these two, and that would be where you get to Travis Burgess. Probably the most interesting member of this quarterback room, because if you're talking about pure talent, this is the guy that has the most in this room. The thing is that he is coming off of an ACL injury that cost him all but 2 games of his senior season a year ago. And so now you would imagine that he's going to be back to full health. He was not limited when they were in the spring, but, he might have been taking it a little bit easy, trying to ease himself back in, not trying to push too hard in certain respects. Now you would expect him to be up to full speed. The question is there any chance that he actually factors into the quarterback race this season? Because if you're just basing it off of pure talent, this is probably the guy that you think has the most in that room.
I wonder how the Taron Dickens situation maybe plays a role into this, right? Because I do think if Dickens doesn't ultimately have to leave Carolina, then I would have thought this was not even on the table. Really just get Burgess maybe ready for next year. But, we know that those two guys are going to battle it out, and that's going to carry it over. But he's the most gifted of all the quarterbacks in the room. Like, he is now what we thought Bryce Baker was this time a year ago. He's the future of the quarterback room, in my opinion. Like, I think if you're projecting how they want to build their roster, and they've probably got, their big board put up there. Well, it's not a big board because Michael Lombardi uses a typewriter. But when he's typing it out, he's probably doing Travis Burgess as the quarterback for 2028 and 2029. I could see him maybe getting a little bit of run. But I'm also open to where, man, if we're really thinking that 2027 is the year, right? If he displays something to where you need to put him on the field, I think I'm willing to go through a growing season with this kid. Like, even if it means we go 4-8, even if it means we go 5-7, if it just because I do think there's that much potential there. I think ultimately that's not going to happen. I think the two guys we talked about previously are going to battle this thing out. Hopefully we come back from Dublin and we have our quarterback. But I do wonder if the Taron Dickens situation maybe opens the door for him, at least early on in fall camp, to maybe work his way into it and make it somewhat of a 3 quarterback race as they get ready for TCU.
I think when you look at this, you would imagine that if he, because of what he can do as a runner, that was really what stood out to me when I watched him in his first game last year at Grayson, was all of a sudden this guy really became a dynamic runner. Wasn't that he wasn't able to run the football when he was the previous year, but he took it to a whole nother level in his senior season. And I was waiting to see what the stats were ultimately going to look like for him. And that's that running ability, which I think he got a lot faster. I think he got more shiftier. I think there is a way for him to be able to impact Carolina this upcoming season. The way he's going to do that is if he has a special package for himself. That's at least right out of the gate. I think that's the way that you could see him make an impact. If I'm being realistic, yes, he's the most talented guy in this quarterback room, I think, in terms of pure talent. But I think it's a lot to ask him to, coming off of the ACL, be a guy that factors into this quarterback race. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, he did enough in the spring, and Bill Belichick, Bobby Petrino, they have him on the back of their mind, and they're saying, hey, let's just see if he really takes that big of a leap as we get into fall camp. Spring is where you're sort of working it out, becoming a freshman in college. It takes time for some guys to adjust. Maybe he just needed that period, and all of a sudden he's going to break out here. But you didn't hear those things coming out of spring practice that, hey, this is a guy that's actually pushing already to be on the field this year. So I think if you had heard that, then maybe we start having those conversations. but I think it's probably just a little bit too early to say that just yet. Now, one thing that I would not rule out is, look, if things go bad at the quarterback position and Billy Edwards just really struggles, Miles O'Neill has his ups and downs as well, and Carolina gets to a point in the season where they're just like, look, we want to see everything that we've got in this quarterback room. We're just trying anything at this point. That could be where you could see Travis Burgess. That could be where you turn to him and he's the third guy, because I believe he's going to be the third quarterback on this roster. I think he beats out Arturi Newkirk. And again, that's me just basing it off of pure talent, based off of what I watched from these guys in high school. I like what Arturi did, but I do think that Travis Burgess is a guy that is more purely talented than him. I think he's a more complete quarterback than he was coming in. Does the year under the belt for Arturi Newkirk ultimately help him to be able to beat out the former four-star? We'll say, wouldn't rule out Arturi Newkirk by any stretch of the imagination. He just beat out Bryce Baker last year when nobody really gave him a chance. So now, is he going to be able to do the same thing this time around? I think that's where you could see Burgess get his opportunity, is later on in the year if Carolina really struggles. Hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully one of these two guys really does emerge and becomes a serviceable enough quarterback to at least have Carolina in bowl contention. But if it gets to that point, that could be where you see Travis Burgess. And then, I think that the battle for QB3 is going to be fascinating, because you've got Travis Burgess there, but Arturi Newkirk, look, he played last year, only guy on the roster this year at the quarterback position to play in a game last year for Carolina. He was 3 of 6 for 23 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Also carried the ball one time for 13 yards. There is some mobility there. There's no doubt about that, but he really succeeds throwing from the pocket. In his final 2 seasons at the high school level, he threw for 7,472 yards and 94 touchdowns and ran for 1,363 yards and 19 touchdowns, all while leading his high school to a perfect 31-0 record and winning back-to-back state titles at one of the highest levels in the state of Virginia. This is certainly a guy that I don't think we can count out. It seems like any challenge that's put in front of him, he's been able to navigate at least to this point. His name was brought up in the spring, but he wasn't a guy that was talked about much. When it comes to this third-string quarterback battle, I think, again, it's very similar to the first, to the battle for the starting quarterback job. I think we would prefer the younger guy to win the job outright, but I don't think you can rule out that Arturi Newkirk finds a way to be the third quarterback on this roster.
No, you cannot, which is what validates what we talked about when we set the scene for the beginning of this position preview. There's more talent, there's more ability, there's just more depth.
Yep.
To where if something were to go wrong, you feel that Carolina's got enough to maybe navigate it. And what's probably going to happen with Arturi Newkirk is he'll more than likely be QB4, and he'll more than likely transfer when the season's over. But what is he going to do in practice? How is he going to push, whether it's Travis Burgess or, whether it's, whoever the second quarterback is? That's how you get better throughout the season when you're not playing. Like, iron sharpens iron. That's the phrase you're about to start hearing as we get into training camps around college football and around the NFL. This is a guy that, because he's going to have to fight, scratch, and claw to have, to be quarterback 3, he's going to push Travis Burgess. It's going to make Travis Burgess better. And guess what? If Newkirk emerges as QB3, then he's going to push whoever the second quarterback is. And now you're having internal progression and development on your roster. And that's how you get better. And that's how these rooms can grow from game to game, week to week, season to season. And there's value in guys like them, and this, even though he may never play a meaningful snap here at North Carolina, he could be a part of the development of whoever the quarterback is this year, next year, and beyond. But if he were thrust into action, I mean, the kid, from what you can look back at his high school, Kid was just a gamer, dude. The bigger the stage, the better he played. And so, it's not what you want. I want to preface that. I'd much rather see Billy Edwards Jr., Miles O'Neal, Travis Burgess being the guys taking shotgun snaps. But if this guy had to go out there and play, I think there's confidence with better coaching around him with Bobby Petrino. He could be a competitive quarterback and at least give Carolina a chance. But I do think ultimately he'll be quarterback 4. He'll transfer out of the program. But this will be a guy that Travis Burgess will tell you, he made me a better quarterback because the way he pushed me in practice and training camp. And I think it's important we highlight that.
Yeah, that's ultimately what we're looking for. And I think that's the other thing when you look at, well, what shows you that this is a better room this year? I think there's going to be more competition in this room. I think everybody that's there, like, look, if you started any of the 4 quarterbacks, I heard this. I forget whether it was Inside Carolina or Tar Heel 24/7. They said if you start any of the 4 quarterbacks that are in this room this year, it would be better than what you saw last year. Now, look, how true is that? Ultimately, I have no idea. I don't know if that's actually going to end up being the case that, hey, if you started Arturi Newkirk, he would be in the first game of the season, he would be better than what you saw from Gio Lopez. But I like to hear the fact that there is a lot of competition in this room, that guys are really pushing each other. You're going to see a battle not only for the starting quarterback job, but, hey, there's going to be a battle for that third-string quarterback job as well. We're not just going to base it off of who is the most talented. No, we're going to let these guys actually go out there and compete. And it's why, you can't rule anybody out for being a factor in that first game of the season until we actually get the reports that, hey, certain guys are out of the running, or until we actually take the field in Dublin. And I think, look, you said you expect more. When it comes to this staff, I don't expect anything to come out from fall camp. I think it's going to be very similar with what we saw in the spring. I think there's going to be 15, 20-minute windows where the media is able to view what's going on. A lot of it is going to be probably stretching, maybe some very basic drills that guys are going through. They're not going to get a look at any of the team periods. They're not going to get a look at much of the 7-on-7s. There might be some moments that they get looks at that, but it won't be anything concrete. I think there's going to be a lot of unknown about this position going in. But judging off of what program sources are saying, and just judging off of the stats that are there for a guy like Billy Edwards Jr., the highlights and film that's there for him, same thing on Miles O'Neal. I feel much better about this room than I even felt this time last year. And I was a guy that bought in on Gio at a point last year. I didn't love the acquisition when Carolina originally got him, but once we got to the start of the season, I bought in. Again, I think it was buying in on what the guy could be if he was utilized correctly. But I feel now it's more justified this year than it was last year to buy in on the guys that Carolina has in this room. What does it ultimately lead to? I think as long as this team makes it to a bowl game, I think you will be satisfied. And I think in order to do that, this quarterback room is going to have to play pretty well, because we'll talk about it right before the season starts. We'll go through the schedule one more time and tell you where we're at heading into the season in terms of record prediction. Guys, it's a really tough schedule. I know On3 Sports released their toughest schedules in the ACC last week, and they had Carolina as 4th in the ACC. I find that hard to believe that you've got 3 teams that have a tougher schedule than Carolina does. Carolina, by a lot of metrics, I know there was one from Phil Steele, and we're hoping to talk to him again later on this offseason. He had it as Carolina having one of the toughest schedules in the entire country. So in order to navigate that, you're going to need some really solid quarterback play. I think that Carolina is going to be able to get that, whether it's in the form of Billy Edwards Jr. or Miles O'Neal, because they are going to have the ability to turn to the other one if one does struggle, and even eventually potentially turn to a guy like Travis Burgess if they need to. All right, we already answered the question a little bit. Oh, really quickly, did want to mention DJ Mazzoni and Andres Maires Jr. They are going to be a part of the quarterback room as well. no longer walk-ons. They are guys that are on scholarship because of the new rules in college football, but they're going to be guys towards the end of the roster. Just glad that those guys are on the roster again this season to provide a little bit of deeper depth. But put it this way, if Carolina gets to those guys on the depth chart, Carolina's in some deep trouble this season. There will be a lot of injuries that would have to happen in order for them to get to those guys. But the ultimate question that has to be answered, because we both said that we would like to see Miles O'Neal emerge from the battle as the starting quarterback. The ultimate question is, as you sit here right now, and if you had to make the determination of who will be the starting quarterback in Dublin, who do you think it will be?
Oh, okay. I'll give you this answer. Billy Edwards takes the first offensive snap against TCU. Miles O'Neal takes the final offensive snap and is Carolina's quarterback the rest of the way.
Okay.
They're gonna play two quarterbacks. As much as I disagree with it, I don't see how you don't. To be honest with you, I don't see how you don't go out there with that and not give them both a chance. I just think that when it's all said and done, and I'm not saying that means Carolina's winning the game, Carolina can be down 58-0. I think when they take their final offensive snap, Miles O'Neal will be Carolina's quarterback.
Yeah, I'm in a little bit of a different spot than you. I don't think they roll in with two quarterbacks because I don't think that's not a recipe for success. And I don't know that Miles O'Neal is that much different from Billy Edwards. If it was Travis Burgess, I would get it. If you said, hey man, Travis Burgess is going to be a guy that's going to come into this game because he can run the football at a really high level, and we feel like that's something that Carolina is going to want to do at certain points in the game, then yeah, okay, I get that. I don't think that Miles O'Neal is that different from Billy Edwards Jr. in terms of what the offense would look like. So I think they will stick with one guy. I'm going to go with Billy Edwards Jr. Now, what I will say is that I believe that Billy Edwards Jr. starts the first game of the season for Carolina. I do not believe that he will start the final game of the season for Carolina. I think at some point during the year, and it could be very early on, it could be as the season progresses, I do think Miles O'Neal will eventually be the starting quarterback for the Tar Heels. He will get his opportunity. But I do think first game of the year, going up against a Power 4 opponent, team that, has some question marks on their side as well, Carolina's going to want to roll in with a veteran at the quarterback position. And so I think they're going to value what Billy Edwards Jr. brings with what he was able to do in his time at Maryland. And so I believe that Billy Edwards Jr. will be the starting quarterback when they begin the season. You guys, if you read the article, you would have known that heading in. And that's what we're going to do each day that we end up doing these position previews. That's when we will put out the position preview on the website. So make sure that you keep an eye out. Our next edition of the podcast won't be too far off here, where we will be previewing the running backs for this upcoming season. And that is just the beginning of a line of position previews that we are going to have coming up for you guys here during the next handful of weeks and into the start of fall camp there when they eventually get out there in August. We're going to try to have all these done before fall camp officially begins. I know that's certainly something we've done before. The thing is that we're a little afraid that we're not going to get that many storylines coming out of fall camp. So we'll play it by ear. We'll see how it's going in terms of the time, our schedules, and how we can get these out here to you guys. But just know that we're going to be doing these every few days here for you guys and previewing this roster. And you look, even though I look at this team and see a team that's probably on that border of making a bowl game this season, it's going to be somewhere in that area. I will look at the schedule and make my predictions when we get to that edition of the podcast. I do think this is going to be a team that's going to be much more exciting than a lot of people are expecting. And I think the quarterback position is just a great look into that. There's a reason why we, expressed some excitement in this room tonight. And we hope that you guys feel just as excited too. Make sure you leave your responses in the comments for you. We'll be reading them afterwards. We'll respond to you guys as well. What do you think about this quarterback room? What do you expect for them this upcoming season? Who do you want to see as the starting quarterback for Carolina this year? And who do you think emerges as the starter when the team takes the field in Dublin on August 29th against the TCU Horned Frogs? Make sure you answer all those questions in the comments section here of this video. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel. We really would appreciate it. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the season begins. So if you like what you saw here tonight, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any editions of the podcast moving forward. Again, the next edition of the podcast that we will be doing, we'll be going to the guy that stands right beside the quarterback, the running back room for this upcoming season. There's good reason to be pretty excited for this running back room this upcoming season. So find out why on the next edition of the podcast. Again, if you didn't read it, make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, and read our article that we have up there. Find out who I think emerges as the third quarterback on this roster. I told you that I have Billy Edwards Jr. as the starter. Definitely have Miles O'Neill as the second guy on that depth chart heading into the season opener. But who emerges as that third quarterback? I think that's going to be an important question as well. So make sure you head over there to the website, read a little bit more about these guys over there at HeelToughBlog.com. We will have the running back edition up for you guys the morning before. I didn't get to put it up until this afternoon. The quarterbacks, we'll make sure that we have it up the morning of the recording for you guys so that you can read that, get yourself prepared, and then be here locked in that night for the edition of the podcast previewing that position group. And we'll be doing that all throughout the next month or so here on the Heel Tough Blog and the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Meanwhile, also on the website, we are covering you on all of the stuff going on with basketball off season. So make sure that you guys go over there and check out Angelo Brizzi's commitment article. He signed on with Carolina yesterday, and so he is going to be a part of the 2026-27 roster. Make sure you guys go back and check out that article. And also right here on these same channels that you're watching this edition of the podcast, you can check out the Four Corners podcast. We had that edition earlier tonight where we broke down Angelo Brizzi. We also talked about the offseason as a whole for Michael Malone and his staff. What grade did we give Michael Malone and his staff for what they did this offseason? And where do we think this roster is as a whole heading into this season? How confident do we feel about this group being an exciting one to watch? All of that in the edition of the podcast that we did earlier tonight. So make sure that you check that out. Also, did want to plug one other thing on the football side of things. If you guys missed it, last night Carolina landed a commitment in the 2027 class. They flipped a wide receiver from Cincinnati. Make sure you go back and read about 3-star wide receiver Chad Willis, and also go over to the podcast edition that I did last night. I go a little bit more in depth on what I saw in his film that I really like and why he's a guy that is on the rise on some of these recruiting websites. You can check that out. Really have appreciated you guys being with us through the offseason. I know there hasn't been a ton of information on the team, and that's something that we really crave. We always loved what Mac Brown was able to bring to us throughout the year. Those were podcasts that were so easy during that time. It's a little bit more difficult now, but we're making sure that we keep you up to date on everything going on with Tar Heel football, and especially when it comes to this upcoming season. So stick with us here, as I said, over the next month, where we bring you all of these editions of the podcast. So that's going to wrap it up for tonight's edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.